Well, I mean, the interesting thing about that is we're doing right now is that this technology that we're able to do right now kind of really bailed us out as far as us. I mean, musicians and composers and authors and those of us that do podcasts, et cetera, and things like that. Without that, wow, it would really have been difficult. It was difficult enough. But I started an album, before the pandemic. And fortunately, because of online, I was able to finish it. We finished it like, kind of like virtual. Uh, and, the same goes for the book and the same goes for all these, podcasts and Zooms and things. Other than that, I don't know. I tell you, because I've noticed, just in myself, but I mean, we're kind of like we've lost a little bit of our kind of sharpness. There's no question because we've been, locked up pretty much. So it's good that we can get back.
Brain fog is the word that people are referring to it, and it is a symptom of both people who have gotten COVID and also just people who have been sort of disconnected in the way that we have for so long.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I did a show. We haven't done a lot of shows, but I did a show about 2 weeks ago in Florida, and for the first time, I forgot my stage shirt. I opened up the suitcase. Uh-oh.
Oh, you didn't pack it?
I didn't pack it. I mean, so that's usually the first thing that goes in is what you're going to be on stage with, because that's the reason for the trip, So I realized, oh boy, well, better tune in.
How important is a stage shirt, in terms of just sort of being in the right frame of mind?
My manager likes me to dress up, in his words, like a rock star, you see. So basically, if I don't want to hear him, I dress up nicely. I mean, I always dress up nicely. And the point is that being casual, it's a different era now. And like in the olden Rascal kind of like 60s days, people were just getting into the fact that, like you could go casually on stage. And then they took that to the extreme where they had like a T-shirt on or something, So it all depends on where you're working. If you're working in a casino and they expect you to look presentable, so we always try to look presentable.
The casino thing is a lot more in line with the way that things were when you were starting out. I mean, partially because you did, I think, had a residency in Vegas early on, but even beyond that, all of the 21 and up shows that you were playing, there was a certain level of presentation that people were expecting.
I totally agree with you. That's how it is, and it's true because the younger people, though, they shouldn't go in there in the first place. What little money they have, they should keep.
That was a formative experience for you, though, playing Vegas, the Desert Inn.
Yes, it was. It was really, it was an awakening because, when you come from a small town, I did not grow up in New York City. I grew up about 20 minutes north, and I had a good childhood, kind of sheltered in a way, but when you get out to the Desert Inn, and you get and I was working from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the lounge with this lady from Canada, actually. I was backing her up with a few other musicians. And I saw and heard these stories about people like losing everything. I mean, literally their plane tickets home. And it made an impression on me. A lot of the famous, like entertainers of that day would come in, and they, some of them would give me advice: stay out of that room, kid. So I really learned a lot.
In a sense, isn't there kind of a gamble to basically dropping out of medical school and deciding that you're going to play music for a living?
Very much so. Very much so, and that was a really important part of my. My years, because of the fact that I was able to seek out some answers from a guru, from someone from India, a Swami, Sachidananda.
An actual guru, a literal guru.
An actual guru. And that was one of the first questions that I, kind of queried him on to say, help, what do I do? Because, I mean, the story is pretty simple. When you're a medical person, if you've got a degree, say it's an MD or a PhD or something, or a doctor or a dentist, in my case, my family, you're a dentist until you retire. However, you better keep making hit records or you disappear into the one-hit wonder universe.
Certainly, there's no risk of the Rascals of being remembered for one specific hit. Even having had a string of hits the way you did, it's still, that's not a momentum that you can keep up forever.
No, it's impossible to keep up forever. Now, like I say, I'm very fortunate that I've been able to kind of keep going, but not very many people do. And when you're young and you kind of like look at that slippery slope, I don't know, I guess you can't ignore it. If you ignore it, I think it's foolish. So anyway, I sought out some advice, and the advice that I got was very interesting. I don't know if I should share it with you, because he told me, he said, how old are you? And I was early 20s. And he said, well, you're very lucky. And I'm paraphrasing because, he didn't use my vernacular, but he said, usually you don't find out till everything is a crock until you're much older. So I said, you mean everything? He said, yes, everything. Pretty much what's happening is you're looking outside when you should be looking inside, because the outside is all containing these pitfalls of, well, gee, I'm a doctor, but I'm a lawyer, but I sure don't want my kid to be a lawyer. Oh, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you hear that so many times. That's because it's inner. It's not outer peace.
You were already at that point in your early 20s where you were, I don't know if disillusioned, is that the right word?
Yeah, that's the right word. Think about it. I mean, seriously. I mean, you come out into the so-called recording world. And I got this in my book. I have this as far as like, meeting older artists, especially like, black artists, R&B artists, which I was part of over there in Atlantic, saying, what do you mean you guys have no money? What are you talking about? And they would say, little brother, you got to wake up, my man. I mean, it's one thing to make money. It's another thing to get it in your bank account. And I said, what are you talking about? And so I found out that a lot of these artists really never got paid. I mean, I don't know if you've read or heard about Tommy James. Tommy James. Well, I remember he wrote a book about it. And basically, I mean, I paraphrased like this. He didn't get a royalty check for his music until the 90s.
And Tommy James was a white artist, so that was a different that was less systemic, cultural, and more record label.
Well, the black artists didn't have a chance, but I mean, they didn't have a chance, at least. But I mean, Tommy was working, and the only reason he could put out the book and say that, and the only reason he got paid is because the gentleman in question passed away, and so he didn't have to worry about being erased.
The character from The Sopranos, the friend, Hesh, who's based on a lot of the lawyers or the kind of the publishers at the time, who essentially just took all of just got all the royalties, which, as we both know, is where all the money comes from.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, you have to be careful, and basically, the thing today that I really think is very different is that they have these music schools now where you get educated a lot more than just going out, basically from, being a college student or whatever, because you can find out a lot about this. There was a book around, it's probably still around, called This Business of Music, which is how I ran the group when I first started. It was written by 2 or 3 different accountants and lawyers, and it was like a Bible of what to and what not to do in the business. You had to make sure you paid attention.
You were that savvy that early on, that you were really kind of running the back end of things?
Trying my best. I mean, most of us, most of us have this right brain, left brain kind of thing, but at least I was educated so I could read, so I figured, let me read.
You were pre-med. I mean, clearly you've got a brain in there somewhere, Felix.
Well, you hear all these stories, like, and you say, well, okay, let me do my best. It's impossible. I mean, social media today, and like the internet. I'm sure I could have got a lot more information today than I could have then from this book. Because you can get contracts. They don't actually give you advice. You have to kind of dig in, find a subject. Let's see, page 342. Managerial contracts. Things like that. It's just a big help. And there's a kind of naivete about a lot of musicians. I mean, not present day. I think present day musicians are a little sharper.
You have to be, because there's for a majority of them, there's no record label to do all the heavy lifting. Like, you need
Correct.
to know how to do every aspect of the business.
Yeah, it's a different world now. And as I say, just on a musical level, I mean, when you go to a music school now, you really learn. I mean, down here we have in Tennessee, we have We have this Belmont University, which has become a really good music. Oh, I'm sorry about that. A music school, and one of the turtles is one of the professors there, and he and for all of the people out there that are listening, if you want to hear a real great expertise on management, Google the Turtles management video on YouTube. It's not only true, but it's hysterical.
Is that Flo and or Eddie, or is it one of the other
Yes,
members?
yes, yeah. He's over there. He's been there for a while, and he's I think he's taken over the department. So it started as a songwriting course, and it ended up into a musical business course. So you really will get an education from somebody like that.
Certainly you see that a lot, whether it's academics in his case or people, moving on to working with a publisher or a record label, but finding another role sort of within the music industry, because, obviously it's the industry that these musicians know the best, but you're living on music for all this time.
Yes,
How did you manage that amazing feat?
I read the book.
Yeah. Okay. So,
No,
but it was,
I've
I mean,
been
is it as simple as sort of as making sure you own the publishing?
well. It's just it's a simple thing to know that. It's another thing to accomplish all these things because especially when you're part of a group. Because you see, this is this was my education period in life because I used to be a communist. You see, and we were all equal. And then I realized I don't know if that works. As a matter of fact, it doesn't.
You mean specifically in the context of a band?
I mean, specifically in the context of one man, one vote, that was a mistake. Because what happens is your weakest link says, well, I got an offer to go to Japan. It's a long story. I have this in my book where things are really happening. This is in the 60s. And one of the royalty members said, that's too far. So now you don't go. Now, a lot of zeros have disappeared from your potential bank account. So now I understand that, maybe in heaven that works, but on planet Earth, you got to pay attention. I mean, if you're in charge of your own career, first of all, you're very lucky. Second of all, if you have good advisors, second of all, you're very lucky. Advisors, that's so hard to find. I didn't find, seriously, with all due respect to past tense, a manager until very recently, within the last 10 years.
I'm sure there were plenty of people along the way who wanted to be advisors, but actually finding somebody who you can really trust is another matter entirely.
Trust and talent. You see, because, I mean, it's just my opinion, but I think a lot of the real, people who have the kind of intelligence and capacity to do this marketing wise, they don't want to put up with nonsense from a rock and roll artist. They'd rather go to Wall Street and make zillions, because a lot of people they mistreat their management. They really abuse them to a degree where say like, I don't want to do this. So we lose a lot of really good talent.
And I assume that for those who actually do go down that path and become managers, finding somebody who actually respects your opinion is also difficult. I mean, they probably assume that you're in a rock and roll band. Clearly, you're not going to be making good decisions. It's my job to sort of step in and make all of those business decisions for you.
Well, the difference today is very serious, like in terms of like Taylor Swift and Garth Brooks. Let me tell you something. They don't make too many mistakes.
She started really young, and I think that's what a lot of this comes down to. This is, you had that issue. A lot of these artists early on, you're talking about people who in the world is making good decisions at 19?
She's made certainly good decisions business wise. Let me tell you, I'm very impressed. I mean, I'm sure she had help from, someone. I'm not sure who. Garth Brooks, another one. I mean, my God. I mean, he was a marketing major, but it shows the moves that they make are pretty intelligent and they pay off. But as I say, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
I don't know her story too well, but early on, I think about like professional baseball players when they start out, a lot of them are 15, 16, and that's not too far removed from rock and roll stars. If you're in a band and somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm going to make you a big star, kid, you're probably going to make some bad decisions and you're probably not going to, read the fine print necessarily.
Yeah. But as I say, there are exceptions. There are exceptions, and they're more current than past tense. In the past, there were people like, believe it or not, like Sam Cooke and Otis Redding. these people really were way ahead of the game in terms of like, being aware of things such as production, record companies, production fees, et cetera, like that. They were really sharp. They're also no longer with us.
I believe it, but I think what you're kind of getting at is what we were talking about before about particularly in that time how difficult it was to be a Black artist and to actually make a living off of it. When you had that eye-opening experience, that conversation, what was your reaction? Did you feel that there was anything that you could do sort of within your power to try to make things better for Black artists?
Yeah, basically, it was a wake up. I mean, specifically, my case was, I don't know, when there was only one left, Sam and Dave. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, hey, kid, wake up. Because I mean, here I'm like, oh man, how cool is this? Basically, what it was is in the book also about the Blues Brothers. They copied their whole thing, and I said, man, how cool? Blah 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 blah. And I said, hey, little brother, let me tell you something. What the money's going? It's not going here. And I said, what do you mean it's not going there? I mean, and like it causes you to, just grow up. That's really what it was. Grow up. And as far as helping, well, the only way that I could really make any kind of dent in that is I established this policy of having I really wanted to have a Black artist open up for our shows. That happened as a result of a group that opened up for us once time, and I think it was Young Holt Trio or something like that. And they came backstage and they said, "Phil, thank you so much for having us on the show here because you have no idea how important it is us." Because they weren't really an R&B band; they were like a pop band.
Yeah, soul, organy, not super
Right.
dissimilar from what the Rascals were doing.
And so I said, "Wow, we don't get a chance to play for Black artists. You don't get a chance to play for white artists. Let me try this." Well, it caused a lot of tension because I didn't realize the can of worms that I was opening up. I mean, it's so simple, but not. But that's the way I could help. I mean, there was nothing else I could do in terms of like, be aware and, stop being like a, silly kid.
What does trouble look like?
Well, we got serious feedback from some of the promoters. Serious feedback, like in hell with you guys, we're not booking you. And I mean, I just never dawned on me that there was that much. And then I look at 2022 and I see this is still going on, and I say like, okay, well, I guess I was a little ahead of the game, like maybe 60, 70 years.
History is cyclical, and some things have certainly gotten better. It's hard to argue that, but talk about wake-up calls, I think, for a lot of people, particularly a lot of white Americans the last couple of years have been a wake-up call. People believing that a lot of these things were in the past, and then suddenly you realize you can't ignore them when they're in front of your face again.
Exactly. I mean, it's an interesting time to be alive, to say the least.
Having seen these waves, having seen that things change, but fundamentally maybe things don't. Is there anything that makes you hopeful?
Oh yeah, young people. I really have a lot of faith in young. I mean, first of all, they're so smart. They're so far. How worldly is the best word I can use than we were. I mean, like I say, when I was that age, they're connected, certainly connected universally. There's no doubt about it, which may be good, but I think it's important that they be aware that there are other countries in the world and there are other races in the world. I'm not so sure that was the case, back then. We were a little bit isolated, especially way back when.
That's fair. And certainly that's something that technology has opened up. We're speaking to each other in different time zones, but you were always a seeker, it seems to me. And that is something that I appreciate you having listened and read interviews that you've done recently. You understood implicitly that there was more out there and you tried to find it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's very important. But I just don't see, like, for example, when we talk about a country like Iran, for example, what I've been told, and I may not have the exact numbers, but I think the younger population outnumbers the older population by maybe like 5-1. And I do not believe that the young people want to go along the lines that are being rigidly written for them. I think they just want to rock and roll and have a good time and actually touch their girlfriends and listen to music and have an iPhone I just see that as that's the hope I have. I think that the young are going to save our planet.
In your early 20s, you ended up with a guru, as you said earlier. Do you have to seek that out? I assume that a guru isn't somebody that just who sort of pops into your life at one point.
No, seriously, I was reading this book, which I highly recommend, called Autobiography of a Yogi. Autobiography of a Yogi was written by one of the first yogis to come to America. And at the end of the book, it says, if you need a teacher, if you're looking for a guru, ask and he will come. And believe it or not, that's what happened.
That's one of those kind of abstract pieces of advice, right? What does asking mean? Just sort of putting it out into the universe?
Exactly. And it happened. And again, I have this in the book, but it was just like I was, okay, I guess here he is. It was just like that.
It's in the book, but I still want to hear it out of your mouth. What was that experience like?
Well, what happened is we were asked to do a television show. There was a pilot. There was a friend of ours who had a big kind of famous nightclub in New York called The Scene. His name was Steve Paul. He also managed, later years, he managed Johnny and Edgar Winter. And many people would go there. Jimi Hendrix would go there, and Tiny Tim would go there, and Jose Feliciano would go there. Well, he called up and he said, "Would you guys do me a favor and come to be on this potential pilot television show for WNEW Channel 5 in New York at that time?" Of course, he was a good friend. He helped us when we needed it, and we helped him when he needed. And I walk into this show, and believe it or not, there he was, circled by a group of young people, a man in an orange robe, sitting there, and I said, oh my God. I don't even think it was 2-3 weeks after I finished that book. I didn't want to finish the book because I was just like, I was immersed in this land that, I never heard of anything like.
Isn't that an amazing feeling?
It was an amazing feeling.
What made it clear that he was your guru?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Actually, he did, because of the fact that, it's as big a decision for him as it is for us on the other end. This gets really into the philosophies, but when someone takes you on as a disciple or a student or whatever you want to call us, follower, they're taking on a big responsibility for us. And in a real, karmic sense, they're taking your karma. That's a big word. And they don't just sign you up. You know what I mean? You don't just go in there and pay, some money and you got to kind of be around a while. You got to prove yourself that you want to really do this. Because he told me that. He said, you Americans, you guys are amazing. He says, in other words, like, if I told you I got a pill right here that could make you a cosmic scholar, how should I take it in 2 seconds? He said, well, there's no pill. You got to work and earn it. So, he has to accept you. And yes, you have to accept him, and, it's really, I guess you can kind of say when you find a soulmate or something like that. There's like oh my God, this is it. This is really cool. You don't have to really use much intellectual kind of like decision making,
I really like the pill analogy because I think that was particularly relevant to that point in time. Obviously, it's something that's still happening, and I don't have any sort of moral or ethical issues with people taking drugs responsibly. But it does seem to me, I wasn't around then, but it does seem to me in hindsight that people have always been looking for shortcuts, and they thought that they would find shortcuts in a literal pill.
Well, take a look at TV. Like I tell you, what problems do you have? Take this and you'll be fine. Forget about changing your diet and maybe, doing a little exercise and getting enough night's sleep. Take this pill, you'll be fine. It's just a way of thinking. And, we're the Western world is kind of like, we've really got that in our culture, no doubt about it. But I cracked up when he told me that because it's true. And I told him, yeah, take it in 2 seconds, bro.
We touched on this a little bit before in terms of life lessons of, the very early days of the band. But, insofar as you're comfortable discussing your big takeaways and the, I don't even know if advice is the right word, but
Mm.
the knowledge that he bestowed upon you
Oh
that
yeah.
really had the effect of changing your life for the better. What were some of those big takeaways?
Well, the big takeaways, I mean, the simplest ones are the physical part of it. I mean, basically, the formula that most gurus do is just a simple kind of mental, physical, spiritual health. In other words, like, okay, clean up your act. And clean up your act means what are you eating? What are you smoking? Does your body move? I mean, do you actually move your body? Yeah, I mean, seriously, what are you thinking? What are you exposing yourself to? Because, over the years, like I really spent a lot of time just kind of like being around him so I could hear his thoughts, and, people would ask him questions like, well, hey, how about what's, can I go to a porno movie? What do you think? I mean, oh, and
Like a priest.
you should hear the questions, me seriously. And he would, he would look at it and say, well, look, just be aware of what you're doing when you see that. It's going into your subconscious and it's alive there. And it's kind of like, you got a photograph in there, and the photograph is there. It's in your album. You want it there? Be careful, you know. So, like I say, it's up to you. I'm not going to say good or bad, because he had his thoughts about good and bad. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, somebody would ask him, well, he says, well, what's good and bad? What's good and evil? He said, well, let's take electricity. Is it good or is it bad? He says, if you plug your iron in, it's good. You plug your finger in, it's bad. So I learned like these little kind of just simplistic kind of thing. Stay healthy. Keep your body clean. Keep your mind as clean as you can. And being, the rock and roll business, hey, man, you're kidding me? You know what I mean? I did the best I could, And seriously, it has helped me. And with all due respect, knock on wood, I'm in my late 70s, man. I'm still out there doing it. So I owe him a debt of health as nothing else, mental and physical.
You're still doing it, but I would extend that to just say that you're still with us and you still have your faculties, which is a lot more than I think a lot of your contemporaries can probably say.
No, I got to say my bandmates especially, it's kind of sad, because now you got to pay attention. We all have a genetic makeup, obviously, and we all have certain, things that are going to happen unless we really take care. Well, my advice is take care, because if you want to be around here, just pay attention.
Obviously, the band went through a breakup, and really at a time, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the sense that I get is you were still on top while the wheels came off.
Yep.
Was he around for any of that?
Oh yeah. Well, interestingly enough, prior to the actual departure, how should I put it, of my writing partner and friend there, Eddie Brigatti, he had quit once before, about 2 years prior to that. We were still on Atlantic at the time. And I proposed a meeting with Swami. And it was so interesting because here we are there. We had the band, we had our accountant, we had we had around this holy man. And, we were trying to make Eddie kind of see something, what do you think? And so the teacher, the guru, told him this, said, look, he used to call him the happy monk because he never met anybody. I never met anybody like Eddie from my band. He was from, New Jersey, which is kind of like another planet to most of us, He said, look, he says, I want you to be aware of something. He said, when I came to Hawaii with you, we brought him out there, to be our guest, to kind of like just be in his presence, if nothing else. I saw the gift that you were giving to the fans, talking to Eddie. They love you, want you to be there because of the energy that you're giving out to them. Don't you understand? This is what you were put here to do. This is your job. This is your calling. Get it? And basically it worked for a short period of time, but he did come back, but he didn't really come back all the way in terms of like, his work. And then after that he left. But yeah, he tried, he tried to do what he thought was, and there was no prodding on our part. I mean, that was his opinion. He thought he belonged there.
It sounds like you were trying to keep things together.
Yeah, well, I think like if you look at a lot of other groups, there's another group out there, Crosby, Stills and Nash. You'll. I mean, if you read their book, I mean,
Yeah, no, I haven't, but I know that that is at least to me, sort of the big difference there, because obviously we talk a lot about egos when we talk about music, but these are 3 or 4 guys already well established who are then in a band together, and that's really hard to keep together.
well, the guy who kept that together was Graham Nash. Graham Nash has a really tactful way of doing things. He's the kind of people you need in the United Nations.
You say that, and I'm like, yeah, if you ask me who the level-headed one in Crosby, Stills, and Nash is, I would probably say Graham Nash. That
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
and he went out of his way to make nice, make amends, and to stop the warring parties. And it's great because to a degree it worked, but there's only so much it can do. It's exactly kind of like what's going on in the world right now. Oh my God, do we have to talk to some people here, boy? Woo.
Does the band keep going for a little while after Eddie leaves?
Well, no, we kind of splintered, and the interesting thing is when he left, it was right at a contract signing where we were going to we were like free agents going from Atlanta to Columbia. So I tried to assemble a new band, a new group, around, the name, if nothing else, and it was a really good band. But, the thing is when the public, I'm just looking for, reasons why, but I mean, it really stretched out. I took it in a direction that basically I think we needed to do anyway because the business was changing from an AM business to an FM business, from a singles business to an album business to a jamming business. I put some really great musicians together and, but you see, the thing is the public sometimes they lock on to who you were rather than and so okay, but I still enjoyed the Columbia albums, and the good part of that is that uh, long answer to a short question, but in Japan they voted one of those Columbia albums to be turned into a digital album, which we didn't have that yet. We were on analog. And that was Peaceful World.
When the band splinters, I mean, you're what, probably in your early 30s at that point?
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
You're still a young guy. You've still got your life ahead of you. Are you thinking about going back to medical school, or what does the future look like at that point?
No, you just keep, basically you say, well, okay, well, you just keep on going. I mean, like I say, you just do the best you can. And, I mean, look, first of all, you have to enjoy what you do. And, if you don't enjoy being in the music business, seriously, you really should do something else because it's not easy. But what is easy? No business is really easy, I don't think. So you just keep going and, try to, overcome the hurdles. I mean, the emotional part of it was more difficult than the actual, realistic part of what am I going to do now? I mean, I was very hurt. I still am extremely disappointed. It's sort of the same thing as, like if you get a divorce, and you had all these great moments together, and then, oh boy, you got some bad moments together.
Right. When you described that moment with the Swami in the room, the first thing that popped into my head was, sitting around with your soon-to-be ex-spouse with your 2 lawyers in the room. That's what that moment sounded like to me.
That moment there, and again, I put this in the book, it was magical. And I could tell you that because, like I say, I don't know who's going to read the book and who's not. But I was sitting, and there was a line. There was like a circle around him. And the tradition is when you see a guru.
When I said it sounded like a divorce proceeding, I meant when you brought him in to talk to Eddie with the manager in the room.
Oh, that, yeah.
That sounded like all the stories I've heard of divorces, of, being there with your soon-to-be ex-spouse and 2 lawyers in the room.
That's a lot worse than that, believe me. No, it was very gentle and very kind. But, unfortunately, somebody took a tape, but I had an actual tape recording of that whole meeting. And I really understood. Yeah, I understood what was going on in, Eddie's brain at that time to a degree because of his responses to the questions, and it's better that I don't say anything about it because, I don't want to get any more lawsuits. But, the bottom line is I understood, it's like, oh, what's happening like with these tennis people like Naomi Osaka. You aware of all that? And like Simone Biles, the phenomenal. There's a lot of mental kind of issues that happen to people, and I guess someone really should know how to deal with that. But again, I think that someone should be a professional rather than just, hey, I read this in a book, you should, and that's what, I think they're trying to do is to say, hey, look, these people are talented athletes, but they're human beings. And, they may have they just have to talk to someone and get it talked out or talked in. Maybe take some time off, or something like that, because it's kind of sad watching these young people are going through right now. And look, after a pandemic, of course we're all screwed up. Come on, man, we're not.
And they're similar in that they're young people who are experiencing success at a very early age. When in a lot of ways their brains are still forming. Like there's no way that's not going to leave a mark on you.
I know, but I mean, I think it's taboo. I mean, don't they understand? These are human beings. I mean, gee, like, God, give them a break,
I would say I think that is a way that society is starting to get better. That I think we are at very least getting better about having those specific conversations.
Absolutely.
And not shaming people.
Absolutely. I mean, because there always was this kind of like negative look towards, well, you're going to a psychologist. Yeah, I'm going to a psychologist, and because I need some help. Geez, that's so bad. I mean, I got a headache. I've got God forbid, I go to a doctor when my arm hurts. You know what I mean? Well, when my head hurts, I go to a doctor. And the absence of that in our police force, the absence of that in our society is causing a lot of trouble.
Did you seek that kind of help? Were you able to get that kind of help in those moments?
Well, here it is. Very simple. When I met the guru, I keep going back to that. He said to me, first of all, I want you to check me out. He says, isn't that how you people talk? And I said, yes. He says, I want you to make sure that everything I'm telling you, I'm living. Otherwise, don't do what I'm about to tell you. And I said, okay, I'll check you out. He says, I'm going to take your brain and I'm going to shape it to where it should be. Just relax. See, because the theory is this: every 12 years, every cell in our body changes. So if I have that energy, that vibration, that holiness going into every cell of my body, I'm going to be fine. You don't need to really go into specific, like, I think this, I think. You don't have to do it. Just do the techniques. You'll be fine. And I believed it, and I still believe it, and as I say, he was walking and talking and doing everything till he was 90, so.
It sounds like the book is something that you've been working on for a long time.
Well, I don't know if I told you how it started, but we did a tour, a Broadway show called Once Upon a Dream in 2013, 2012, Steve Van Zandt. And so to publicize it, they would have press conferences. And so the four of us would get on stage and somebody would ask us questions. And I noticed that every single one of us had a different answer for the same question. So I said, okay, I think I better bone up on my world history because I'm not sure that Custer really lost that battle. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, because how do you know? Unless you were there, you don't know. So I said, well, let me start at least writing things down that I remember. Well, I can still remember because I could have sworn I was there, And then it dawned on me, I guess through somebody that I was working with at the time, that Rascals were only 5 or 6 years out of my life. What about the rest of the years? Maybe somebody might be interested in that. I said, okay. So we started digging into the past and talking about it. That's how it happened.
That is a wild thing specifically about rock and roll bands versus pretty much any other occupation. The Beatles were 10 years all told?
Well, yeah, but boy, did they make an impact. Wow.
Sure. No, but that's my point is
wow.
And the Rascals did as well, but it's just sort of remarkable that what percentage of your life ultimately that incredibly important period was. It was not that much time. And probably when you were going through it, it felt like forever, but in hindsight, what's 5-6 years?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, this story, I really don't think rock and roll bands are that much different from, it's just that they're more publicized what happens to people like us, rather than you go into the corporate, like you look at some of these movies that they've had about the Gucci's and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff going on we don't know about them in those families, let me tell you.
Now that the book is finished and is coming out, I mean, was there a sense of, or have you gotten a sense of catharsis through it? I mean, was this an opportunity beyond just being able to sort of tell these stories and remember these stories. Were you able to sort of exercise some of those demons?
I imagine so, except for, I really think I've kind of risen above a lot of the, the negativity and things like that has happened because, I'm basically an optimistic, positive human being, and I'm very fortunate. I mean, I really am. I've got a great family, got great grandkids. I'm just, I'm very happy, man. Like I say, okay, I'd like to be able to dunk a basketball, but I can't. You know what I mean? So I don't get upset about things like that. Uh, yeah, I tell you what really came out is that I really have tremendous respect for these people like Stephen King and John Grisham that pour these books out like nothing. I mean, my God, I did one, it took me forever, you know. So I have a lot of respect for authors now because that verbal kind of like output is really interesting. It's like rap songs. I mean, I tried to write a couple of rap songs. It's not easy writing a
Really?
rap. Oh yeah, it's not that easy, man. I mean, telling you because you have to be able to put that rhyme scheme together with kind of a different wordage, and yeah, it's not that easy. Really, not that easy.
You got to tell me real quick, what was the context of you writing rap songs?
Well, it wasn't really a rap song like, like the real, down and deep stuff. But I wrote a song. I did an album with Steve Cropper. We put a tentative rap song on it. It's just like it was a talking song. You know what I'm saying? And boy, I tell you, it was really interesting. And that was like when like what's his name, Will Smith, and they had that type of raps out. You know what I mean? It was not like today.
Fresh Prince.
Where they really, really, but I'm telling you, man, these Snoop Dogs and these guys, they really, that's not easy.
I love that stuff too. And it's,
Do you? All right.
I'm an all kinds of music kind of guy.
Yeah, good. That's good for you, but it's tough. It's tough to produce that stuff.
This is an argument that I've had with my parents on many occasions, where they are very much and not to cast any aspersions, but probably this is maybe a feeling that's present with a lot of people of their generation that hip hop is talking over music.
Got to be a shock to a lot of folks. I mean, to hear what this stuff is. But yeah, I mean, this has been happening ever since we dropped from the 45-minute classical piece to the 2-minute 30-second rock and roll piece. I mean, everybody's, what the heck's going on here? I must admit, it's getting a little far out, though. It really is.
I think the fact that you've held on for as long as you have, and that you do appreciate that our firm speaks well of you too. But it's funny, you talk about this sort of positivity that you've had, and I always think about all these like music books on my shelf, and everyone loves the story of he wrote these happy songs, but beneath all of it lied this dark, tortured soul. But it sounds like the guy who co-wrote A Beautiful Morning, I mean, it sounds like that's your character, that's your personality, that's who you are.
Yeah, it is, and you gotta really. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're fortunate to have a good childhood and good parents, and a lot of people don't have that. You know what I mean? I understand. I mean, I know what goes on in a lot of people's lives. I mean, I had some tragedy in my life like everyone else. But again, when you find a way of thinking that kind of it just kind of understands, if nothing else, what this is all about here, because what this is all about here is it's written in a lot of like, for example, Torah. I mean, there's a lot going on in our earth that if we want to find out about, it's always been chaotic. I mean, this is nothing new, and we'll see what happens. This is a really difficult time right now for anybody to keep their positive optimism. Believe me, I know. And you have your moments when you don't know what the heck's going to happen next. I don't know, man. I wish I could tell you.